Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. So today is another sketchbook session and I've actually made pretty good progress so far, but the one thing that I'm trying to show you guys is the fact that you can see all the wrinkly pages in this particular book, and the reason being is that I've been painting a lot more, and whoops, I'm not supposed to show you that one, but I have been trying my best to keep up with using gouache for every so often so that I don't actually forget how to use it, I guess is the way I'm gonna put it, because I've always had a love-hate relationship with using gouache, but right now, because I still have the motivation and the momentum of wanting to paint with it, I want to continue with that for a little longer. So before we jump in, actually, let's go ahead and take a look at some previous drawings that I did in the past. So I have this watercolor journal, which is the one that's the red and blue, and then in this particular sketchbook I have this drawing of Kaisen with some sort of like really cute drink that I did with alcohol markers, and then the watercolor journal I have this one of Masaki, still think it's really cute, but this is the one that I wanted to have a redemption for. So I really don't like how muddy and kind of dull everything looks in his drink. I don't think I left enough like lighter areas or areas that need more saturation. So today we are going to be redoing his drink, but I am going to be changing it up because I no longer think that drink kind of suits him per se. And now that I've kind of like solidified what Selwin's gonna look like, I will be actually hopefully drawing him a little bit more with his actual like personality-ish kind of thing in mind. So material wise, I ended up actually sketching with the blue color from the Uni Dia Colored leads instead of red this time, because the majority of Selwin's drink is going to be blue, and I ended up giving myself a little bit of an easier time by giving myself more room. So instead of working on a vertical surface where my page is kind of be like half the size, I decided to flip it so that my sketchbook was, on its side and we can just go through the entire spread instead. That way I can spend a little bit more time painting with a little bit of a larger brush and not feeling too pressured to do smaller details. So I went ahead, flipped it around. We started to sketch with the drink. I threw in Selwin, and he's not like awkwardly sitting in front of the drink anymore. I decided that I wanted him to be jumping up and kind of being like, hey, hello, I'm right here. But instead of waving, I ended up giving him a spoon instead, sticking out from his hand, because the drink that I ended up giving him was more akin to like a float. So kind of either like a melon soda float or like a Ramune-esque kind of float instead. So because of that, I feel like if you have ice cream on top of your drink, I think it's kind of required that you might need a spoon, unless you want to like slowly mix it with your straw and let it melt within your drink. That might be an option too. And we just like breezed through the sketching process because of how bright my camera and my light was making my sketchbook. So after that, I went ahead and darkened up the lines, and I've also went and switched over to the color red, and I'm doing the sketch for majority of like Selwin's face and like hair, a little bit of the clothing area, to have a bit of a warmer tinge to the sketch rather than having blue, as like some of the areas that have more of like predominantly yellow or beige or something warmer, mixing with the blue might not be the best idea unless I paint really cleanly and have good line work, which is a little bit hit or miss for me. So instead, we're just gonna sketch with red, make it softer right off the bat. Also, for like context, if you feel like you would just want to sketch in blue, there's like no need to do this. This is kind of more like a personal preference, because sometimes I do see the blue peeping out from certain areas, like you'll see later, like near the areas of where the ice cream is and like the moon and a little bit of orange. You'll see a little bit of the blue popping out, and it does bother me like a smidge, but for now it's okay. Then we are moving on to our kind of like rough colors and kind of like priming the paper a little bit. So I pulled out my Paul Rubens watercolor set, and I'm just gonna start to basically block in a lot of the base colors, get as much of like all the colors that I want to use so I have a better idea what the entire thing is going to look like. Oftentimes when I do gouache painting or even like watercolor painting, I never do like a full color comp for everything. Sometimes I do it for a little bit for watercolors if I'm planning out lighting, but usually I just block in very subtly what the underpainting lighting might look like rather than the entirety of the piece, which might be a detriment to myself if I am looking for a particular look. But for the most part, I kind of just like the paint and see how it goes. Unless like I said, if there's like a specific kind of vibe or look or atmosphere that I want to go for, I might spend a little bit more time trying to figure out the color palette or laying down certain colors so that I have some kind of groundwork to go off of. But for at least gouache, specifically in my sketchbook, I'm just going to lay down watercolor, one, to give it a little bit more of a rougher texture, because a lot of these sketchbooks that I tend to use have very smooth paper, not any tooth for the gouache to actually hang on to. And because like my color mixing for watercolor, I am definitely more confident in compared to using gouache, so having at least a little bit of some way to determine what colors go where helps quite a bit, even though sometimes it does give me the illusion that like, oh, it might look very bright and kind of like light and airy at first, and then once I put down the gouache it becomes a little bit more mid-tone, a little bit darker. And just me struggling with the medium basically, because I don't know how to mix as vibrant and light colors in a very efficient way. So that's just something like I would like to kind of figure out a little bit more and more as we work with gouache, hopefully more throughout this particular sketchbook. And speaking a little bit more about gouache in the sketchbook, I've already talked about it in previous videos, even like from a few years ago, that I've always struggled with using gouache a lot of the time. So right now I'm just going to take advantage of me tolerating it in a sense, because if you guys saw the very, very short glimpse of Flynn's that I painted earlier, I'm not really liking the piece all that much, but it's still like fun to paint, and just like in general, I like the painting of it. I just don't really like it as like a piece of Flynn's, if that makes sense. But for the drink for Selwin, in terms of like if there was like an actual drink for him, I don't know if there is a name for it, but like I said, it's more akin to some sort of like float. So having ice cream on the top sitting above some sort of soda, I thought it'd be cute to kind of fill the cup with a few stars and a little bit of citrus at the very top. So for Selwin's overall color palette, you can kind of see he's a little bit more of blue and orange. He has a bit of a tan kind of color for his cardigan, and then his hair color is a little bit more towards like blue, purple, indigo, kind of ultramarine territory, while his sweater is kind of getting closer and closer to like a blue green rather than a blue purple. So that's kind of like his color palette in general. But let's move on to gouache. So this is the gouache set that I'm using. It's the HIMI MIYA Jelly Gouache, and I've been using this one for a lot of like my gouache paintings. There are like a few in the past that I've used the Artex gouache, and I know I get recommended from other people to try different brands of gouache to see if I like it a little bit more. But at this point, I don't really want to spend more money on a medium that I might like. I'm going to try my best to just enjoy gouache as is from using this particular set. I know it's not everyone's favorite set, but I personally like it just because of purely out of convenience and the color range for the most part. So let's just go ahead and get started with the painting process. So I already went ahead and revitalized all my paints a little bit here and there by spraying it down with a spray bottle, which is just a empty container of like glasses cleaning fluid that I've cleaned out and just always refilled it with just normal sink water. And then I spray it to just kind of give a little bit of moisture to my paint, and I let it sit for like a minute or two or a few minutes before I actually start to paint. Otherwise, if I know I'm going to be using larger washes or I want my paint to be more on the watery side, I will use a syringe and spray water or put water into each of the individual cups and then let that sit so that we can have a little bit more of a better consistency rather than it slowly drying out from me spraying it with a spray bottle. I tried my best to keep at least a portion of the video where you can kind of see my mixing area. I am not super confident with mixing with watercolor like I mentioned, and I think it is because it is an opaque medium, so it's a little bit harder for me to gradually add color sometimes, or I don't clean my brush as thoroughly because I'm a little bit lazy when it comes to color mixing and like picking up new color. I oftentimes just leave the color on my brush and then dip right into each of the containers. You can kind of see it in the paints as well, especially like the purple in the top right hand corner. It's kind of like greenish muddier color, and then there's like a blue in it too. So I kind of just dip my brush wherever. Every so often I will clean them out, or I have half the mind to actually go ahead and soak them once again with a lot of water, and then going in with a toothpick and a clay tool and just mixing them up so that they kind of revert back to their creamier consistency. I mentioned also in the past that I haven't had any problems with mold. I've taken a close look at all of my gouache, so if you ever see any like oddly, I don't even know, muted green color in any of my colors of my gouache palette, it is not mold. It's just me not cleaning my brush and dipping into several different wells basically without cleaning. But maybe if I do a different video where I use gouache again, I will go ahead and actually take the time and show you footage of me cleaning it out. I think I've done it in the past, and there's plenty of other like artists and other users on YouTube that have shown the process of them remixing their paints. I've seen some people add some sort of something similar to gum arabic, if not like glycerin, to their gouache paints so that they remain a bit more of a moist consistency. But I have not done that. I've done it with like previous paints. I think it was the Artex brand, but I believe they harden the same way. I don't know if I just bought something completely wrong when mixing them, but I don't really have a need to let my gouache paints stay like wet or moist the entire time. I have no problem just like reviving them as I need. And so far, as long as they haven't produced any mold, I don't really want to buy new paints, nor do I want to replace this particular set. I think I've talked about this. The only color that I've constantly refilled over the years of me having this particular set is the white. So I might even look into to see if there's any other white available. I don't know if this one's titanium white or if it's ivory white, Chinese white, whichever. I might have to look into it because I don't know if this one's like the most opaque and the most bright. So I want to see if there is a different one that I could possibly use. I know there is a difference between each of the whites so that they perform or behave a little bit differently when mixed or used like watered down or like at full opacity. So I'll definitely look into that, and if I find any suitable replacement, I probably will refill that paint eventually because I do use it quite a bit. So I kind of talked through a lot of the painting process. I did start with the drink first because Selwin is in the front, so I'll just have to be a little bit careful with painting Selwin to make sure that he doesn't overlap any weird parts of the drink, I guess. But I didn't want to make the entire drink to be a very smooth gradient. I know it will drive me up the wall trying to get that nice consistency and making everything look soft. So I decided to use the flat brush that I had and kind of just do kind of swiping motions in a vertical way, and then slowly adding it to be darker and darker as we reach the bottom and a little bit darker towards the top. Now, one thing I do regret, and I wish I pulled out the reference a lot earlier and took a closer look to interpret how to paint and draw ice cubes. I've done this before digitally, but I don't think I've ever done it really with gouache. So I accidentally forgot to add more blue or some sort of darker color into the ice cubes that are kind of like yellowy white right now. So they kind of just look like cheesecake blocks and or like sugar cubes. So they're a little bit too opaque. They don't really read remotely translucent, let alone transparent. So I might go in off camera and try my best to add a little bit of blue or some sort of muddier color to make it look like more of that reflective or see-through look. Because right now they're too opaque. You can't really see any places where it could potentially be transparent. So they're just reading as like a solid block of whatever you wanted to interpret it as, I guess. And then to kind of like fill out the drink a little bit more, because I do have like a very choppy kind of blocky gradient going on in the drink, to kind of fill up the space, I decided to put stars. And this is kind of like one of my favorite methods of letting things still be very much cell shaded look. Like it's not really blended by any means, but I'm going to take advantage of being able to manipulate the value of what I'm placing to kind of like create a little bit of depth. So like I said, as we move, oh, I forgot. Oh, dang. So unfortunately, I think I forgot to hit record when I was painting the like basically all the little stars in his drink. So I would actually start with white and paint over the light areas, letting some of them bleed into our mid-tone blues. Then I'll slowly add more and more of the blue into my paint. And as we kind of add more blue, we're adding a lot more of a darker value. And then hopefully as I move down into the drink, we'll just kind of make almost like ghost-ish appearance of some sort of star. And then some areas I'll add much darker ones so that they're more prominent and kind of push forward. And hopefully it'll give a little bit of depth. Otherwise, like his drink is looking a little too sparse. I think it would have been smart for me to either add like hints of orange where it might look like a orange peel peeping through the drink, or some sort of semblance of ice cubes again floating near the mid to bottom section of the drink instead of them only being at the very top, because I feel like that's not as realistic for the drink as well. But at this point, I think I was more or less satisfied with how the drink was looking, other than the fact that because of where the little ball part of the glass was kind of being hidden by Selwyn's cardigan, I shifted it ever so slightly, and now it looks like the glass is not fully flat, or like it's not fully resting. It looks like it's like off kilter a little bit. So I kind of regret that, but I think it's okay. I am still trying to get used to wanting to like gouache in a way that I can use it more proficiently. But this little Selwin that I ended up painting, I actually really like. He looks really cute, and it's been like a super long time since I painted a chibi with gouache in particular. I think the last one I did was probably Wanu in like a very long time ago, kind of mixed media sketchbook that I had from Artex a while ago. But this one came out very cute, so ended up brushing a very light wash of his skin tone. I added a little bit of shadow here and there. He did come out looking a little bit too pale, but I think once the other colors kind of tie it together, it doesn't bother me as much. His skin tone is probably closer to what actually his hand is, the one that's sticking outwards towards like the left side of the page, but I made him a little bit too like pasty white. Hopefully it doesn't look too off. He has some color to his face, I guess, right now. But after that, I ended up just blocking in as much of the colors I could. And I think another reason why I like this chibi version of Selwyn so much is the fact that I don't mind if the colors are a little bit more solid or a little bit blockier, because chibis tend to have, I guess, like they could go in very much different directions in terms of how you want them to look. Therefore, like, I don't mind if things look a little bit more simple and a little bit more blocky compared to like if I was painting someone's, I guess, like face, let's say Flynn's or something. I'll fuss over it a lot more versus something simple like this. And I think for the most part, I kind of left a lot of things still kind of like brushstrokey and kind of messy for the most part, especially like his hair. Later on in the cardigan, I do kind of like screw up his sleeve and where the sweater is kind of like sliding down his arm, because I accidentally forgot where the beginning and the end of his cuff for his sleeve started, and I accidentally do the line art like all the way over the sleeve, and I made the cuff like super long, so it looks kind of weird even though the stripes like definitely stop at a certain point. But I just wanted to say also, thank you guys very much for liking Selwyn. I'm glad a lot of you guys find him very cute and adorable. I've been drawing him definitely way too much recently, but so far he's been like the biggest motivation for me to just randomly doodle and draw in my sketchbook. And hopefully I will maybe do an alcohol marker drawing for him. I'm not too sure. I think that's like one of the only mediums that I haven't done for Selwyn specifically. And it's not like I've done every medium for all of my OCs, but I think it'll just be fun to play around with his color palette. Blue I use a lot just in general, but like orange is kind of like hit or miss for me, so I would like to try to find a way to incorporate more orange into an illustration with him. And I think I kind of have an idea. I might save it for like a watercolor illustration, so if you came to like yesterday's stream, you might have seen a glimpse of it. I'm not too sure. We'll figure it out. I will also be adding Selwyn to my flower zine, or like my OC flower zine, so I'm gonna kind of whip up some ideas for him as well. And to anybody who had questions about Arakan and Anka, who are Akemi siblings of my OCs, I will be eventually doing the reference sheets. I am still torn about Arakan's look right now, and because I'm not like 100% satisfied, I don't want to like solidify a look that I don't like and then eventually we'll change it. I want to be at a point where I like it enough that I can commit to the design as is. Otherwise, it might be in like a weird phase. Even like HIMI was kind of like that in the very beginning. I was like not sold on how I designed him. And I think Selwin is kind of the embodiment of failed attempts of characters that I wanted to like or like wanted to have. So Akemi was one probably, and then my old Selwyn, and I think Kaisen a little bit too, and maybe Moriko kind of all have a little bit of something that I wanted in a character. But luckily Selwyn kind of has that all down now. So yeah, I'm just gonna draw him a heck of a lot. Not only that, I think like aesthetically, I've always liked stars. I always think they're like very cute in designs or like very pretty. So I kind of am glad that Salmon's more roughly associated with stars rather than like some other motifs or themes that I have for my other OCs. But I think that's it for the gouache painting portion. So we can kind of see how it looks at this point. I'm going to give you a bottom to top look of the entire illustration. I actually really like what it looks like right now. I don't know if it's because the colors are a little bit more like eye candy for me rather than liking the entire piece as is. But I noticed something as I went kind of looking at Selwyn a little bit. He was missing a few details, so I went ahead and grabbed an Artex paint marker instead of grabbing my gouache and decided to at least throw in an attempt to add his little belt design because it was looking a little sparse down there. So might as well add it in, and I'm using just acrylic markers to fill those out instead. I might have to do a little bit of digging and searching, but I want to try out those acrylic gel pens that I feel like so many people are using nowadays. So maybe for a future video I'll do that. But hopefully you guys enjoyed watching me paint with gouache of this little drink for Selwyn. I did mention that I would like to do other versions for my OCs. I don't know if I'll continue to do them in gouache or if I'll do it in alcohol markers or watercolors in the future, but luckily I do think that this one is a big improvement, at least to the one of Selwyn. Even though it's not the same medium and not the same drink technically, it's definitely something that I like a lot more. So yeah, I'm just glad that I could do something a little bit more cuter. I still like the one of Maseki and I still like the one of Kaisen, so at least luckily I probably won't have to redo theirs anytime soon. Other than that, I think that's the end of today's little drawing session. I'm going to keep a piece of paper to keep it from smudging on each other for now, but I think for the most part, I'm going to try my best to keep up with doing gouache every so often. So apologies if there's more gouache videos in the future, but I'll talk to you guys next time in the next video. Bye bye!